We had, well, Trent had an emulator too, and we had an Emacs, and we had a PPG Wave, and we had an Oberheim Expander. It was one of Trent's favorite keyboards. It was one that didn't have a keyboard. It was just it looked like a giant tabletop sort of synth. And we did have one of the first Macs running, I believe, Performer. And it was so funny because they made like he also had a 20 megabyte hard drive that was the exact same footprint as the little, Mac Plus, and it was so funny, 20 megabytes, but there wasn't any audio recording. It was just MIDI, back then. So you would have to sync the computer to a 24 track tape and then, do your sequencing and then sync it to the tape and then print the stuff over to tape and then do your guitars and vocals to tape afterwards, like punching in, and he worked at a recording studio called the Right Track in Cleveland, and it was pretty much just the two of us most of the time, and somebody be at the computer, somebody be at the console, if he's singing, I'm engineering, it's pretty much it. But yeah, it was very minimal gear, which was another, it's another thing, back then, a lot of this gear was just being invented at that time, and now it's like every $1,000 MacBook comes with GarageBand, which is a pretty, everybody's like, kind of jokes about it. Oh, it's free with Apple. But compared to what we started with, that is an incredibly sophisticated piece of software. That can do full audio recording and all the suite of effects and all the plugins and jam packs and everything else. I mean, things have come a long way, and I guess it's been 20 years, but still, that's a quick 20 years for all that. So, but it made you be really creative. We would do tricks like we needed to sample. See how I can explain this. We would need to, like, memory was very expensive, and so like an Emacs I think only held like 3 seconds worth of memory time. So you would have to be very creative in the use of sampling. So what we would do is we would, like, if we wanted like a 2-bar loop that we wanted to sample to just trigger a loop over and over, is we would sample it, like we would tune it up an octave, or sometimes 2 octaves, and then sample that, so that the sample was only like 0.1 second, and the sample was sound like blah, 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 like that. It's a sample. But then once you put it back on the keyboard, then you just go to its editing page and go tune this sample down 2 octaves, and it would be back at the right pitch. Obviously, there'd be a certain amount of aliasing and artifacts that were involved, but you could have a whole keyboard full of 2-bar loops if you sampled them all, so they were just tiny little sped up, like, chipmunk sounding stuff. And then for 3 seconds you could fit quite a bit of material on your keyboard, but you would just tune them up and down where you needed them. So that's how we would get around stuff like that. You really had to become kind of a master of your keyboard, and for sampling, like no waveform editing. I mean, no one knew what a waveform ever looked like in '86. It was just a bunch of numbers, and 000000001 sample was the beginning, and you would just have to move the start and end points. Just kept triggering it 100 million times until you got that beginning and that end point on the 2 sliders, just looking at a series of 5-digit numbers, exactly the right ones. And then you would just go, okay, because you'd have to truncate off. Anything you weren't using, you had to truncate off just because memory was so coveted and scarce, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it was a total different thing. But yeah, that record was done with, minimal technology, I mean, well, not minimal technology, but minimal gear by today's standards. By then, I guess it was pretty over the top. Trent had, the means to, get, to own some of this gear. That was pretty pricey at the time too.